When South Korean media outlets analyze the trajectory of Jungkook in the American entertainment industry, their reports consistently highlight a shift in how global pop culture now accepts and promotes non-Western artists. Jungkook has become one of the few Asian performers to secure recognition not as a niche or regional act, but as a mainstream figure in US pop culture. The term America's favorite pop icon has frequently appeared in both local and international headlines, sparking discussion in South Korea about what this status represents for K-pop, Korean soft power, and the larger global entertainment economy. Korean media traditionally pays close attention to how the country's entertainers are received abroad, particularly in markets like the United States, which is considered the global center of pop culture. In Jungkook's case, the coverage has extended beyond the usual reporting of music charts and award ceremonies. Journalists have analyzed the depth of his influence in America, noting how US media houses, record labels, and even consumer brands treat him as an equal, if not a leading figure among the biggest pop stars. Several national broadcasters in South Korea, including KBS, SBS, and MBC, have produced special reports on Jungkook's growing dominance in the US market. Their focus lies in how he transcends the boundaries often imposed on non-English-speaking performers. Unlike earlier attempts by Asian artists to penetrate the American industry, Jungkook's integration into the mainstream has not been framed as an exception but rather as a natural development of his career. Korean media discussions emphasize that this label signals more than personal success. It represents the culmination of over a decade of BTS's cultural work combined with Jungkook's own distinct global appeal. Unlike K-pop idols of the past, who were celebrated mainly within fan communities, Jungkook has reached the point where mainstream American audiences recognize him without needing the K-pop qualifier. Articles from major Korean newspapers such as Jungang Ilbo and Chosun Ilbo have dissected this shift. They note that being considered a favorite pop icon in the United States is an achievement typically reserved for domestic stars or select global figures like Rihanna, Beyoncé, or Justin Bieber. Jungkook's inclusion in this category signals an adjustment in cultural hierarchies, with South Korean media portraying it as a breakthrough that could alter the global music economy. South Korean analysts often draw attention to how US media frames Jungkook compared to other international stars. Coverage from outlets like Billboard, Rolling Stone, and major television networks has consistently portrayed him as a pop icon rather than limiting his identity to K-pop. This distinction is significant. Korean media commentaries highlight that the removal of genre-based or ethnicity-based qualifiers suggests broader acceptance. Some reports point out that Jungkook's branding in America has parallels with iconic US performers, where personal artistry, stage presence, and cultural impact matter as much as, or even more than, the music itself. Korean analysts have further connected this trend to how Jungkook has become a central figure in the marketing strategies of American brands, showing that his appeal goes beyond music into lifestyle, fashion, and social identity. Korean media outlets also monitor how Jungkook's achievements in the American award circuits reinforce his pop icon status. When he receives nominations or wins at US ceremonies, Korean journalists often contextualize these events within the larger history of Asian representation. For example, local commentators frequently draw comparisons to earlier eras when Asian artists were rarely invited, let alone awarded, at American music shows. In news broadcasts, panel discussions, and entertainment analysis programs, The consistent theme is that Jungkook's achievements are not just symbolic wins, but structural shifts. His presence on these platforms creates a precedent for future South Korean and Asian artists, something Korean media continuously underscores when reporting on his milestones. Another recurring focus in Korean coverage is Jungkook's interaction with American fan culture. Korean outlets highlight how his reception in the United States goes beyond digital fandom, extending to mainstream radio play, television coverage, and brand endorsements. These markers are seen as critical indicators that differentiate a global fan favorite from an American pop icon. Analysts in Seoul often compare the enthusiasm surrounding Jungkook in the United States to how American audiences historically embraced stars like Michael Jackson, Britney Spears, or more recently, Harry Styles. The comparison is not about musical similarity, but about the cultural placement of an artist as a household name. Korean reports argue that Jungkook's integration into that cultural memory marks a milestone not just for him, but for Korean entertainment as a whole. South Korean economic newspapers, such as Mail Business and Korea Economic Daily, have examined Jungkook's influence from a financial angle. Their reports note that his popularity in the US correlates directly with economic growth in areas like streaming, concert revenues, merchandise sales, and brand collaborations. They argue that Jungkook's dominance in the US pop scene validates the long-term investment strategies of Korean entertainment agencies in building global infrastructure. In these reports, Jungkook is often positioned as a model case study. Korean economists highlight how his success reflects the sustainability of K-pop as a global industry, suggesting that US recognition of Jungkook may push other Korean companies to pursue similar strategies for their talents. While careful not to diminish the achievements of other BTS members, Korean media often singles out Jungkook as the one who most naturally aligns with the American pop star archetype. Commentaries note his vocal style, performance, aesthetics, and public image as factors that resonate strongly with Western audiences. For example, while other BTS members may be praised for artistry, production, or charisma, Jungkook is often described in Korean reports as embodying the universal pop star formula that transcends cultural barriers. This distinction contributes to why American audiences and media outlets identify him not only as a K-pop representative, but as an international pop icon in his own right. The Korean public has also been engaged in this conversation, as reflected through social media discussions and TV talk shows. Programs like Radio Star and You Quiz on the Block occasionally feature debates about the implications of Jungkook's US dominance. Online forums such as Naver and Daum host discussions that analyze whether this moment represents a turning point for Asian representation or if it is specific to Jungkook's individual brand power. From the perspective of public discourse, Korean netizens often regard Jungkook's American success as a point of national pride, even if the coverage avoids emotional overtones. The focus remains analytical, evaluating how his influence changes South Korea's cultural positioning in the global entertainment order. Korean media coverage often speculates on how Jungkook's status as America's favorite pop icon will evolve in the coming years. Analysts predict that his influence will extend into other areas, such as acting, global brand partnerships, and further integration into mainstream US culture. They also anticipate that his achievements will serve as a blueprint for future K-pop acts seeking to break into the American market. Some editorials go further by suggesting that Jungkook may alter the very definition of what it means to be a pop icon. Traditionally, the role has been filled by American or Western artists. But with Jungkook's rise, the boundaries of pop culture identity are being redrawn. Korean media consistently positions this as a significant cultural turning point. In the United States, Jungkook is no longer treated solely as a member of BTS, but as an independent figure who can command headlines in his own right. Major American publications such as Billboard, Rolling Stone, The New York Times, and Variety have consistently highlighted his influence. Coverage often emphasizes his versatility, whether in music, performance, or branding, which aligns him with the archetype of the all-around American pop star. Unlike earlier representations of Asian artists in the US, Jungkook's coverage rarely emphasizes his nationality as the defining feature. Instead, articles focus on measurable cultural impact, chart performance, streaming records, high-profile brand campaigns, and public demand for his appearances. This reflects a change in US media practices, where Jungkook is integrated into the same narratives as American performers rather than being placed in a separate K-pop category. South Korean outlets have closely tracked how American media covers Jungkook, often citing these reports as evidence of his elevated position in global entertainment. When Billboard profiles him in the same way it would cover Taylor Swift or Drake, Korean media highlights this as a milestone in cultural recognition. For instance, reports in Yonhap News and Hankyoreh point out that the absence of a K-pop label in US headlines signals a normalization of Jungkook as a pop figure rather than an outsider. Korean analysts stress that this normalization is what differentiates him from earlier Asian stars in the US, who often carried the label of foreign or imported. Television broadcasters in South Korea frequently run special features analyzing Jungkook's treatment in the US entertainment press. Segments on KBS or SBS News often display screenshots of American headlines to highlight the type of language used. Terms like pop icon, superstar, or household name are dissected on air, with commentators explaining how these words carry cultural weight in the US context. Panelists often debate whether such recognition reflects a temporary surge due to BTS's global influence, or if Jungkook's individual brand power has surpassed the framework of the group. While opinions differ, the consensus in Korean broadcasts is that Jungkook's media treatment in the US represents an unprecedented shift in cultural hierarchies. When American award shows feature Jungkook, Korean outlets immediately translate and broadcast how US media frames these appearances. For instance, if Jungkook attends the Grammy Awards or receives a nomination, Korean news highlights not only the nomination itself, but also the tone of US media responses. This dual-layered reporting allows Korean audiences to see how America views one of their own cultural figures. By translating American praise into Korean contexts, domestic media magnifies the sense of significance. Analysts note that this process demonstrates the symbolic weight of US acknowledgement in the global entertainment system. One of the most striking aspects noted by Korean outlets is how American media often ties Jungkook to branding and fashion industries alongside music. Coverage in Vogue, GQ, and other lifestyle publications emphasizes his influence in redefining masculinity, fashion standards, and cross-cultural branding. Korean media frequently cites these examples as evidence that Jungkook is positioned not only as a pop singer, but also as a cultural trendsetter. This expansion into branding narratives has been of particular interest in Korea, where entertainment and consumer industries are closely intertwined. Commentators note that Jungkook's ability to command headlines in fashion and lifestyle publications places him in the same category as American icons like Rihanna or Lady Gaga, who transcend music to become cultural influencers. American fan reactions are another focal point in Korean reporting. News outlets in Seoul often cite social media trends, US concert attendance, and American fan-organized events as markers of Jungkook's dominance. Articles regularly reference Twitter trending lists, TikTok virality, and US streaming data to illustrate how American fans engage with him. Korean analysts stress that American fan behavior toward Jungkook differs from how fans historically engaged with international stars. In the past, international fan bases often had a niche quality, but in Jungkook's case, American fans treat him as a mainstream star, comparable to local acts. This observation is framed as evidence that Jungkook has crossed a barrier that other non-Western artists struggled to overcome. Beyond news coverage, academic circles in South Korea have also engaged with how US media frames Jungkook. Scholars of cultural studies and media have published analyses exploring what it means for an Asian artist to be described as a pop icon in the American lexicon. Academic journals highlight that the term carries historical weight, often reserved for performers who shape cultural identity on a national or global scale. Korean scholars argue that Jungkook being placed in this category represents not just personal recognition, but a rewriting of how American media conceptualizes global stardom. While most Korean media responses are celebratory or analytical, some outlets adopt a cautious tone. They argue that US media attention can be cyclical and influenced by trends, raising questions about whether Jungkook's icon status will remain consistent in the long term. These skeptical perspectives emphasize the volatility of the American entertainment market and the challenges of sustaining long-term visibility. Nevertheless, even skeptical outlets acknowledge that Jungkook's current positioning is unprecedented for an Asian artist. Their cautionary notes do not diminish his achievement, but highlight the need for sustainable strategies to maintain influence. Korean coverage of US media framing also expands into broader cultural implications. Reports often suggest that Jungkook's treatment in America is not just about one artist, but about the opening of doors for future Korean acts. Media analysts emphasize that Jungkook's success may change how American media frames future K-pop artists, potentially reducing the barriers that others face.